Iowa may look like endless farmland today, but hidden in its hills and river valleys are some of North America's oldest mysteries. From animal-shaped effigy mounds to strange tablets, ancient earth lodges, and lost cities, the state holds remnants of cultures that vanished long before written history. Their purpose and meaning still puzzle archaeologists and visitors alike. Effigy Mounds National Monument. If you ever find yourself driving along the winding Mississippi River bluffs in northeastern Iowa, it feels almost ordinary at first, just trees, rolling ridges, and the wide sweep of the river. But tucked into that quiet landscape is a place that defies ordinary. Beneath the grass, hidden under the forests, rest hundreds of ancient earthworks known today as Effigy Mounds National Monument. Effigy Mounds National Monument. If you ever find yourself driving along the winding Mississippi River bluffs in northeastern Iowa, it feels almost ordinary at first, just trees, rolling ridges, and the wide sweep of the river. But tucked into that quiet landscape is a place that defies ordinary. Beneath the grass, hidden under the forests, rest hundreds of ancient earthworks known today as Effigy Mounds National Monument. From the road you might not notice them at all. They look like gentle rises in the land. But step onto the trails, climb a ridge, or look at an aerial photo, and their true shapes emerge. Bears with legs stretched out, birds with wings spanning more than 100 feet, long serpents curving across the landscape. Some are simple cones, others astonishingly precise figures carved into the earth itself. They have been here for more than 1,000 years, silent and unmoving, while generations lived and died around them. More than just shapes in the earth. For the people who built them, these mounds were never just art, they were sacred. Many are burial grounds, others served as ceremonial spaces, or spiritual markers, tied to the cycles of nature. Archaeologists believe the first were constructed as early as 500 CE, with new ones added for centuries, until around 1200 CE. And yet, even with decades of study, the truth behind them remains partly out of reach. Were they clan symbols, written across the land so their stories would never fade? Were they celestial calendars, marking the solstices and tracking the stars? Or perhaps they were messages to the spirits, prayers not spoken but shaped in soil. The fact that no single answer exists makes them feel even more mysterious. A feeling you can't shake. Visitors often describe the same thing, a strange, almost unexplainable feeling. From the ground, the mounds might seem like small hills. It's nothing special. But once you realize you're standing on the outline of a massive animal, the perspective shifts. You're no longer walking through just a forest. You're walking through a story written by people long gone. It feels as though the landscape itself is alive, connected, watching. What you're allowed to see today, Effigy Mounds, is a national monument, carefully protected. But here's where it becomes unusual. You can't fully experience it. Some trails are open to the public, but many of the most sacred effigies are strictly off-limits. The signs along the paths don't warn you for your safety. They're there to protect the mounds themselves. For centuries, visitors trampled over them, dug into them, even stole from them. Human remains were taken, artifacts vanished, and the sacred earth was damaged. It wasn't until descendant tribes like the Ho-Chunk, Dakota, Iowa, and Oto fought for their protection that boundaries were set. To these tribes, the mounds are not puzzles for tourists to solve. They're sacred resting grounds, living places of memory where spirits still dwell. The silence of the place. If you stand quietly on the trail, the first thing you notice is the silence. The forest absorbs sound. A soft wind moves through the leaves, maybe a bird calls in the distance. But there's a hush that feels deliberate. Rangers sometimes share stories about the Bear Mound group, or the great bird mounds near the visitor center. In many traditions, the bear represents the earth and strength, while birds are tied to the sky and the spirit world. But beyond these glimpses, there is no attempt to over-explain. Much of the deeper meaning belongs only to the descendant tribes, and it's not ours to know. And there's something powerful in that restraint. In today's world, where nearly everything is photographed, documented, and posted online, Effigy Mounds refuses to give up all its secrets. You can walk the trails, read the signs, and marvel at the shapes, but you will never really uncover everything. That choice to keep certain traditions private is a way of saying these mounds do not belong to everyone. They belong to the people whose ancestors built them, and they are still sacred today. The mystery deepens. Some of the effigies remain hidden deep in the woods, invisible to the casual visitor. Only those with permission ever see them. Rangers will stop you if you cross the boundaries, not out of hostility, but out of respect. Imagine someone strolling across your family's cemetery, snapping photos, asking questions you didn't want to answer. That's how the tribes feel about outsiders walking on these mounds. They are not ruins, they are still living places of memory. What science can tell us, even archaeology has shifted in tone here. In the past, excavations uncovered human remains, burial goods, and traces of ceremonies. But today, digging has stopped. Instead, researchers use tools like ground-penetrating radar to see beneath the surface without disturbing it. What they've found confirms what many suspected. The mounds are not random. Their placements are intentional. Some line up with river bends, others with the stars, others with each other, as if woven into a larger worldview that we only partly understand. And yet, for all the technology, the interpretations remain elusive. You can chart the alignments, you can measure the distances, but the full meaning, the why, remains beyond us. Frustration and awe, that's where the paradox lies. If you come looking for neat answers, Effigy mounds will frustrate you. You can't climb every ridge, you can't touch every mound, and you can't unlock the secret in a textbook. But if you let go of that desire for complete understanding, the site offers something else. It offers awe, to stand on a bluff above the Mississippi. Looking down at the outline of a bird or a bear pressed into the earth is to realize that you're in the presence of something larger than yourself, something that does not need to explain itself to you. What it feels like today, each season transforms the experience. In summer, the trails become green tunnels leading to overlooks where the Mississippi stretches endlessly below. In fall, the forest explodes with red and gold, and the mounds lie hidden beneath fallen leaves. In winter, the snow outlines their shapes with eerie clarity, white against the earth. Whatever the season, the atmosphere is the same, hushed, solemn, as if you've stepped into a sacred space. Effigy Mounds is not a thrill ride kind of mystery. It's not loud or shocking. It's quiet, contemplative, and it stays with you long after you leave. The paradox of access. That's the essence of Effigy Mounds. You can visit, but you can never fully experience it. You can look, but not touch. You can learn pieces of the story, but never the whole. It's both open and closed, accessible and forbidden. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the reason these earthworks have endured for more than 1,000 years is because they are protected by those very boundaries: silence, respect, and mystery. In that silence, in those limits, Effigy Mounds continues to speak, not in a language we can understand, but in one we can feel if we stop long enough to listen. The Davenport Tablets. Not far from the mounds and earthworks that dot the Mississippi Valley, another mystery once seized Iowa, though this one carried an air of controversy from the very beginning. In the late 1800s, the city of Davenport became the center of an archaeological storm when strange carved tablets were unearthed. Known today as the Davenport Tablets, these artifacts were covered in unusual symbols that seemed to suggest an ancient and unknown written language had been used in the Midwest long before European contact. For a time, it was whispered that they might hold proof of a lost civilization. The story begins in 1877, when members of the Davenport Academy of Natural Sciences, an institution dedicated to studying local geology and archaeology, were conducting excavations in burial mounds around the city. Among the finds were several slate tablets covered in incised markings, as well as depictions of figures that looked human, animal, and even architectural. These weren't simple scratches in stone. They appeared to be deliberate, almost as if someone had tried to leave behind a record of events or beliefs in a pictographic script. When word spread of the discovery, excitement grew quickly. Newspapers of the era speculated about who could have made them. Some insisted they were evidence of a prehistoric literate people, perhaps even proof that old world civilizations had crossed into America long before Columbus. Others connected them to myths of the mound builders, a supposedly advanced culture once thought separate from Native Americans. In the Gilded Age, when history seemed to be expanding with every dig, the tablets promised answers to mysteries no one could quite articulate. But the excitement was short-lived. Almost immediately, doubts crept in. Some scholars pointed out that the tablets didn't resemble known Native American art or writing. The carvings looked suspiciously modern, almost as if they had been made with contemporary tools. Questions arose about their context too. Unlike pottery or bones, which could be confidently tied to a particular mound stratum, the tablets' discovery had fewer witnesses and murkier details. It wasn't long before whispers of fraud began. The controversy only deepened when professional archaeologists from outside Iowa examined the artifacts. They argued that the symbols were a jumble of borrowed forms, resembling everything from hieroglyphs to European letters, yet lacking coherence. One expert famously dismissed them as a patchwork of nonsense. The Davenport Academy, however, was slow to let go of the claim. The tablets had been their great find. and to have them branded fakes would mean embarrassment for both the institution and its members. In the decades that followed, the tablets became less a matter of science and more a matter of folklore. Many locals continued to believe in their authenticity, pointing out that the mound sites of Iowa clearly held secrets beyond what archaeologists were willing to admit. Others shook their heads and argued the tablets were a prank, carved by mischievous locals, perhaps even by disgruntled members of the academy itself. A few suggested that jealous rivals planted them to discredit the group. The truth, buried beneath layers of accusation and defense, has never been fully untangled. What makes the Davenport tablets linger in memory is the way they fit into a broader human pattern, the desire to uncover proof of lost civilizations. The 19th century was full of similar hoaxes and misinterpretations. Strange stones carved with supposed runes or hieroglyphs cropped up from Michigan to Oklahoma, each one drawing crowds and sparking debates. Most were later exposed as fabrications, but the hunger to believe remained. For many, the tablets weren't just about Iowa, they were about the possibility that America's past was stranger and richer than official history admitted. Imagine for a moment the scene in Davenport, when the tablets were first unveiled. Picture a small group of gentlemen in waistcoats huddled around a freshly dug mound, holding up slabs of slate inscribed with mysterious marks. The flicker of lamplight in their meeting hall, as members of the academy debated late into the night, voices rising with the thrill of discovery, and then the growing unease as letters from skeptical scholars arrived, casting doubt on everything. That mix of pride, hope, and creeping embarrassment must have been palpable. Today, the Davenport tablets are no longer held up as authentic, yet they have not disappeared. They survive in collections, occasionally brought out as curiosities, relics of both archaeology and human imagination. If you try to visit them, you'll find that access is limited, tucked away in archives rather than on open display. Their status as a possible hoax means they are treated less as treasures and more as historical oddities, locked behind closed doors. In that sense, they have become one of Iowa's places you can't visit, not a landscape of mounds or caves, but a mystery sealed in storage. Standing back, it's easy to see the irony. The tablets themselves may be fakes, yet the questions they raised are real. What if someone had truly left behind a written record in the heart of North America, long before Europeans arrived? What would that mean for our understanding of the continent's past? The fact that so many people wanted to believe shows just how hungry we are for mystery. Sometimes the power of a discovery doesn't lie in its authenticity, but in the way it captures imagination. If you walk the streets of Davenport today, the legacy of the tablets is almost invisible. Life goes on, the river flows, and the burial mounds that dot the landscape remain the truest monuments to the region's ancient past. But somewhere in a drawer, those carved slates still exist, their markings faint but undeniable. They are ghosts of a mystery that once gripped the city, a story of ambition, belief, and perhaps deception. You can't visit them freely, and maybe that's fitting. Like so many mysteries, their power comes not from what they are, but from what we don't know about them. Mystery of the Glenwood Earth Lodges. In the rolling hills of western Iowa, far from the better-known river valleys, lies the memory of a community that once flourished and then vanished with barely a trace. This is the story of the Glenwood Earth Lodges, hundreds of circular homes built of timber, earth, and clay by a mysterious culture that lived here centuries ago. Archaeologists call them the Glenwood culture, a name borrowed from the town that now sits near their remains. To most people, though, they are almost invisible, a ghost society remembered only in fragments of soil and faint outlines in the prairie grass. When you picture an earth lodge, imagine a domed structure, 15 to 20 feet across, built with a framework of wooden poles covered in packed clay and topped with sod. The design was practical, insulating against both summer heat and brutal winter cold. A smoke hole let firelight flicker through the roof at night, glowing faintly against the hillsides. From a distance, an entire village might have looked like small grassy mounds, blending seamlessly with the landscape. For generations, families lived in these lodges, tending fields of corn, beans, and squash along the Missouri River tributaries. What makes Glenwood so mysterious is not just the architecture, but the sheer concentration of sites. At one time, there were more than 100 known earth lodges in the area, suggesting a bustling community between 900 and 1300 AD. Then, without clear explanation, the culture disappeared. The people abandoned their homes, and the lodges collapsed under the weight of time. By the time Europeans arrived centuries later, no memory of these builders remained among local tribes, at least none that was recorded. It was as if the Glenwood culture had been swallowed by the land itself. Archaeologists have puzzled over their disappearance. Some argue that climate shifts may have made farming difficult, forcing the people to migrate elsewhere. Others suggest conflict with neighboring groups or absorption into larger societies, but the truth is murky. Unlike the Mississippian centers such as Cahokia, Glenwood left behind no monumental temples, no stone carvings, no written clues. Their legacy is faint, preserved in the circular depressions that mark where lodges once stood, in bits of pottery, in stone tools left behind. To walk among the sites is to walk in silence, piecing together lives from shadows. The earth lodges also stir questions about connection. Were the Glenwood people linked to the Mississippians further south, sharing trade and ideas along river networks? Or were they an independent culture that rose and fell quietly, unnoticed by their neighbors? Artifacts suggest they had contact with other regions, shell beads from distant coasts, distinctive pottery styles that hint at exchange. Yet their way of life remained uniquely adapted to the western Iowa valleys, as though they had carved out a niche and thrived until something disrupted it. For modern visitors, the mystery is compounded by the fact that you cannot freely explore many of the sites. Most of the original earth lodges are gone, eroded by farming, development, or time. A few have been reconstructed at the Mills County Historical Museum in Glenwood, giving a glimpse of what they might have looked like. Step inside one, and the smell of earth and wood surrounds you. Light filters down through the roof hole, and the temperature shifts noticeably. Cooler in summer, warmer in winter. It's a space that feels both protective and strangely timeless. But beyond these reconstructions, the true archaeological sites are protected, off limits to casual visitors. Their locations are often kept secret to prevent looting or damage. There's an almost haunting quality to that absence, knowing that beneath certain farm fields or wooded hillsides lie the ghost circles of homes, invisible unless you know what to look for. Gives Glenwood an aura of hidden history. Unlike the towering pyramids of Egypt or the massive stone hinges of Europe, these monuments to human life hide in plain sight, blending with nature, and perhaps that is why they slip so easily into the category of places you can't visit. You can stand near them, but you can't touch their essence, can't really walk where those families once did. Local legend has grown around the gaps in knowledge. Some residents whisper that the earth lodges are tied to the lost tribes of Native Americans, though such claims are more speculation than fact. Others treat them with quiet reverence, recognizing that entire generations of people lived and died here, their lives as real as ours, though now reduced to faint impressions in the earth. The absence of clear answers allows imagination to roam. Who were these people? What stories did they tell under the glow of firelight inside those lodges? Why did they leave? If you visit Glenwood today, the modern town bustles with everyday life. Streets cross where prairies once stretched. Farms roll out in every direction, the soil rich and productive. Most residents go about their routines without much thought for what lies under their feet. Yet the reconstructed lodges at the museum serve as a reminder that this place holds a deeper past, one not easily accessed. Step inside, close your eyes, and you can almost hear the murmur of voices, the sound of grinding corn, the laughter of children. Then you open your eyes, and the illusion fades, leaving only the quiet interior of a replica. This tension between presence and absence is what makes the Glenwood earth lodges so haunting. They are there, yet not there. They represent an entire culture that once thrived, yet their story has slipped through history's grasp. Archaeology can give us outlines, pottery shards, carbon dates, but it cannot give us names, myths, or the moment-to-moment experience of life in those domed homes. Those memories are gone, sealed away forever. Perhaps that is why Glenwood endures as one of Iowa's greatest mysteries. It shows us how fragile memory can be, how entire civilizations can rise, build, and vanish without leaving a clear trail. It reminds us that the land itself holds secrets, even in the heart of America, even in places most people drive past without a second thought. And it teaches us that some mysteries are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be felt in the silence of a hidden depression in the ground, in the weight of earth walls pressing in around you, in the realization that we live atop worlds we barely understand. Cherokee Effigy Mounds. Deep in northwestern Iowa, near the small town of Cherokee, another chapter of the state's ancient past lingers in grassy hills and wooded ridges. This is where the Cherokee effigy mounds once stood in greater numbers, quiet shapes raised by the hands of a people whose names have been lost to history. Like the more famous Effigy Mounds National Monument in the Northeast, these earthworks were fashioned in the forms of animals, birds, bears, and serpents stretched out across the land. They were not mere piles of soil but deliberate creations, shaped with care and aligned with features of the landscape that we still struggle to interpret. The mounds near Cherokee are far fewer today than they once were. Farming, construction, and erosion erased many of them before they were ever properly recorded. Early settlers often plowed over the strange ridges without realizing their significance, or worse, leveled them intentionally to make way for new fields. By the late 1800s, only fragments remained, and archaeologists raced to document what they could. Even those records are incomplete, leaving us with more questions than answers. What we do know is that this part of Iowa was once home to dozens of effigies, as well as burial and ceremonial mounds scattered along the ridgelines overlooking the Little Sioux River. When you imagine these shapes, think of enormous silhouettes carved into the earth, not visible up close, but unmistakable from higher ground. A bird might spread its wings across 100 feet of prairie, a bear might hunker low against the soil, and a snake might slither in an unbroken line along the ridge. Each one would have taken enormous effort to construct, requiring teams of people to dig, shape, and tamp down the earth with tools no more advanced than wooden spades and baskets. To dedicate that much time to shaping the land suggests they carried deep meaning, but what meaning exactly? That is where mystery takes over. Some scholars argue that effigies like those near Cherokee marked clan totems, physical emblems of animal spirits tied to families or lineages. Others suggest they may have functioned as territorial markers, declaring sacred space across the valleys and rivers. There is also the theory that they played a role in spiritual ceremonies, perhaps linking the earth to the sky or the living to the dead. Their alignment sometimes matches solstice sunrises or prominent celestial bodies, hinting at a cosmology we can barely grasp. Unlike the Cherokee of North Carolina, the name here comes from the Iowa town and county, not the tribe itself. The people who built these mounds likely belonged to earlier woodland cultures, ancestors of the tribes that still hold ties to the region today, the Ho-Chunk, Dakota, Oto, and Iowa peoples. Yet much of their specific identity remains obscure. By the time Europeans entered the Midwest, the builders were long gone, and their story had faded into silence. Oral traditions from descendant tribes speak of mound building as sacred work, but few details survive that can be definitively tied to Cherokee's effigies. Walking the land today, the mystery becomes even sharper. Many of the original mounds are gone, erased by centuries of change. A few faint rises still exist, hidden in groves or protected within preserves, but they are not places you can simply stroll up to. Access is limited, sometimes restricted to tribal members or researchers. To most visitors, the Cherokee effigy mounds are invisible, present only in old maps, archaeological notes, and the whispers of local history. It is one of those strange paradoxes, a major cultural landscape that survives more in memory than in visible form. If you stand on a high bluff near Cherokee and look out across the Little Sioux Valley, you can begin to imagine what it must have been like 1,000 years ago. The prairies stretching wide, the river curling through the bottomlands, and on the ridges the shapes of animals resting in the earth. At sunrise, the silhouettes would have glowed gold in the light, visible markers of meaning against the landscape. At night, under the sweep of the Milky Way, they may have taken on new resonance, aligning with constellations or star paths. It is not hard to picture ceremonies unfolding there, people gathered around fires, drumming, chanting, honoring spirits that were written into the very ground. Archaeologists have uncovered burials within some mounds, suggesting that they also served as resting places for the dead. That adds another layer of meaning. These were not just symbols, but cemeteries, linking ancestors to sacred animals and landscapes. To disturb them is to disturb a grave, which is why modern protections are so strict. It also explains why so little excavation is carried out today. Non-invasive technologies may map their shapes, but digging is avoided out of respect. The unanswered questions remain unanswered on purpose, preserved in silence. For those hoping to visit, the reality is disappointing. The Cherokee mounds are not like the tourist-ready trails of Effigy Mounds National Monument. Many are gone, and those that remain are on private or protected lands, closed to the public. You can read about them, you can stand near their general locations, but you cannot walk among them. They are a place you can't truly access, a hidden chapter of the Midwest's past, locked behind the passage of time and the barriers of preservation. Yet there is something powerful in that absence. To know they were once here, to realize entire landscapes were sculpted into animal shapes now erased, is to confront the fragility of memory. The Cherokee effigy mounds remind us that history can vanish not in dramatic collapses, but in slow, unnoticed erasures. A farmer's plow, a housing development, a century of neglect, these can be as final as fire or conquest, Still, enough traces remain that the story hasn't been completely lost. The mystery lingers and half-forgotten rises in the earth, in the careful notes of 19th century surveyors, in the oral traditions of native nations who continue to honor their ancestors. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of Cherokee's mounds. They tell us that not all mysteries can be visited, photographed, or solved. Some exist only in fragments, in whispers, in what might have been, and sometimes that is enough. The land holds memory even when we cannot see it, and in that unseen presence lies a mystery as deep as any. Blood Run, Iowa, South Dakota border. On the border of Iowa and South Dakota lies one of the least known yet most significant ancient sites in North America, a place so important it has been called the Plymouth Rock of the Midwest. Today, it is known as Blood Run, or more formally, Blood Run National Historic Landmark. To stand near it is to realize that this quiet stretch of prairie once hosted a massive Native American settlement larger than many of the towns that exist there now. Its history reaches back hundreds of years, its presence marked by burial mounds, stone circles, and vast archaeological deposits. And yet, despite its importance, it remains largely invisible, closed off to casual exploration, a mystery hidden in plain sight on the rolling plains. The name Blood Run itself sparks curiosity. Local lore says it comes from the reddish tint of the creek that flows through the site, colored by minerals in the soil. Whatever its true origin, the name has clung to the land, lending it an aura of both violence and power. The site sprawls across thousands of acres on both sides of the Big Sioux River, and at its height, it may have been home to as many as 10,000 people. This was no small village. It was a hub of trade, ceremony, and cultural exchange, an ancient city on the prairie. The people who lived at Blood Run belonged to what archaeologists call the one-tour tradition, ancestors of many tribes still living in the Midwest today, including the Iowa and the Omaha. Later, it became a gathering place for the Omaha, Ponca, Oto, Yankton, and Dakota peoples. Imagine long rows of earth lodges spread across the hillsides, smoke curling into the sky, the river below busy with dugout canoes. The air would have been alive with voices, trading languages mixing as goods and stories flowed across the land. Shell beads from distant coasts, copper from the Great Lakes, pipestone from Minnesota, and bison hides from the plains all met here. It was in every sense a crossroads of the ancient world, but alongside the practical bustle of trade, Blood Run carried a spiritual weight. Dozens of burial mounds dotted the ridges, each one a sacred resting place. Stone circles, remnants of ceremonial structures, were etched into the ground, some aligned with celestial events, hinting at a complex spiritual system that tied the heavens to the earth. Standing there today, it's hard not to imagine fires lit within those circles, ceremonies unfolding as stars wheeled overhead. This was not just a market town, it was a sacred landscape. And then, almost as quickly as it rose, Blood Run faded. By the early 1700s, the great settlement was abandoned. Why? The reasons remain debated. Some argue that conflict with neighboring groups pushed people away. Others suggest that the fur trade, introduced by Europeans, drew tribes toward rivers where traders operated, breaking up traditional centers. Disease may also have played a role, spreading silently through networks of contact even before Europeans arrived in large numbers. Whatever the cause, the lodges fell silent, the fires went cold, and the land was reclaimed by grass and sky. The abandonment only deepens the mystery. For a place of such scale and importance to vanish so thoroughly feels almost impossible, yet that is what happened. Unlike Cahokia, with its towering mounds still dominating the Illinois floodplain, Blood Run left few monumental traces. Its memory survived primarily in the oral histories of descendant tribes, who continued to hold it as a sacred place. Archaeologists eventually rediscovered its significance, but by then centuries of erosion and farming had already hidden much of what once stood. Today, the site is protected, but it remains mostly inaccessible. On the Iowa side, it lies quietly near the town of Granite, marked but not open as a major tourist destination. On the South Dakota side, a portion has been turned into Good Earth State Park, where visitors can walk trails and see interpretive signs. But much of the land, the heart of the ancient city, remains off-limits. Archaeologists and tribes alike guard it carefully, knowing how fragile and irreplaceable it is. To wander freely across it would be to trample over graves, ceremonies, and history. The restricted access makes Blood Run a place you can't fully visit. You can sense its scale in the rolling terrain. You can read about its history, but you cannot see the city that once spread across those acres. The earth has covered it, grass has softened it, and preservation has placed barriers around it. What lies beneath the soil is known only in fragments, shards of pottery, points of flint, the faint depressions of lodge floors. These pieces hint at the lives once lived here, but they do not tell the full story. Still, the site carries an unmistakable presence. Stand on the bluffs overlooking the Big Sioux, and the wind seems to carry echoes. You feel the weight of a place where thousands once gathered, where trade linked distant worlds, where rituals tied earth to sky. The prairie feels different here, as though it remembers even though you can't see the full city. The landscape itself hums with the knowledge of what it once held. For modern tribes, Blood Run is not a mystery in the way it is for outsiders. It is memory, a sacred space, a place of ancestors. Their oral traditions connect them to it directly, and for that reason, access is carefully managed. For visitors, the mystery lies in that very separation. You cannot go where ceremonies were held. You cannot walk among the graves. You can only stand at the edge and imagine. And in that distance lies both frustration and wonder. Blood Run reminds us that some of the greatest cities of the ancient world did not rise in stone but in earth, wood, and memory. Their ruins are not towering monuments, but subtle shapes in the grass. To visit is to confront absence, to realize how much has been lost, and to accept that some knowledge will never be uncovered. It is, in every way, a mystery you cannot truly touch, an ancient heartbeat that still thrums beneath the soil, just beyond reach.